Bling. Which?
Last year, with the Dungeons & Dragons Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set, we see Magic the Gathering and D&D merging more and more. Not only are there Magic world guides for Ravnica and Theros, for the most popular pen and paper role-playing system, but now also D&D characters in the first major collectible card game. Well, you know, I've been a huge fan of Magic as a game system since my first games in Mirrodin, but unfortunately I can't say the same for Dungeons & Dragons. That not to say I don't like pen and paper RPGs in general. I've had a lot of fun with systems like the Dark Eye, Rogue Trader, and a longer campaign of Pathfinder. And I know that's actually a modified older version of D&D. But that's exactly why I know what bothers me about the rules. It's things like armor classes and opportunity attacks that I personally don't enjoy in the game. And a lot of people know how complicated the rules can be there overall. Which doesn't really help when you have long breaks between games and so on. That's why I had an idea last year. Is it possible to have this role-playing fun, but only with magic cards and some additional rules? Maybe something like a separate format. There are already quite simple role-playing systems, and it should be based on those a bit. I would like to show you here in a little thought experiment, or something like a short story of a nice gaming evening, how I imagine it. Tom has invited his 3 friends, Christina, Sven, and Jen, to try out a new format of their favorite card game. Instead of Commander, they will play a role-playing adventure in Ravnica today, but not with a D&D rulebook, even though Tom has that at hand to help with the background, but only with a pool of cards provided by him, the Game Master. They all sit down together at the game table, and Tom tells them their first campaign will take place in Ravnica. And before the start of the first adventure, they are all supposed to create a character. To do this, they are all handed the same questionnaire, and their game master lays out a selection of creature cards from the Ravnica blocks in front of them. These are supposed to be the basis of their player character, something like an archetype. Type, class, strength, abilities, color identity, and maybe guild are all dictated by the character card. The 3 players think carefully, and finally Christina takes the Boros Goblin Banneret, Sven takes the Azorius Law Rune Enforcer, and Jen takes the guildless Saruli Caretaker. Then Tom lays out a palette of 1 mana spells in front of them, from which they have to choose 3 in their color, guild color, or optionally, colorless artifacts that further specify their abilities. Here Christina picks Shock, Defiant Strike, and Samut's Run, Sven picks Unsummon, Arrestor's Seal, and Sky Tether, and Jen picks Giant Growth, Mist, and Prey Upon. Along with a really short character sheet regarding their past, the following roles for the 3 players come to life. Christina plays Boris Bannerhand, a zealous soldier of the Boris Legion who has fought alongside many heroes in the War of the Sparks. Sven is Fridtjof, a veteran Azorius vigilant who has dedicated his life and vocation to the safety of the city and its inhabitants. And Jen plays a relatively young Dryad Zaina, not yet part of a guild and more an outsider among her peers, but a self-appointed guardian of the ancient trees in urban Ravnica. Tom says they now shall imagine their characters' names in the card name, and since they're going to be the heroes in the story that follows, they are also given the legendary creature type now. The adventure begins with the 3 player characters meeting for the first time in a beautiful park in the 3rd district of Ravnica. Boris wants to take a nap under one of the trees during his well-deserved lunch break while on patrol. So he rams his halberd into its roots and chills. Of course, the Dryad Zaina in the treetops above him does not like this at all and throws hard nutshells at the troublemaker to scare him away. Boris breaks out into a murderous clamour, which also immediately calls the Azorius policeman Fridtjof to the scene. There's a heated discussion among the characters and players about who is allowed to do what and what not in the park. Tom had explained to his 3 friends that they are allowed to use each of their 3 arsenal spells once per game for certain situations, to gain an advantage or to accomplish certain tasks. Sven already asks Tom if he can't just send Christina's goblin back to his quarters with Unsummon, but the Game Master quickly gets out the next plot point there. A woman's scream disrupts the 3 disparate folks, and they see 4 goblins not far away, snatching a small child from a poor mother's arms, trying to leave with it. The woman begs the group present to help her, and none of the 3 has any reason to refuse. Senna wants peace in her favorite park, and Boris and Fridtjof see it as their duty to save the child. So they stand up to the goblins. Tom now sets up this conflict as a little magic game, a kind of puzzle with cards to solve. On his side, he has only 4 1/1 goblin tokens, representing the troublemakers. He has no hand, no lands, and no deck, but he doesn't have to draw any cards either. He sets his life points to 4 and explains that this represents the moral of the pack before they flee the battle. The 3 players have to shuffle their arsenal spells together into a deck, place their character creatures on the field, and draw a hand of 3 cards. They get 2 forests on their side as a source of mana, representing the environment of the park. Spells they play in this battle remain available for the rest of the game. Their life points are at 3, representing the child's health. Their goal now should be to defeat all 4 goblins or reduce their moral to 0. They lose if all their characters die, the life gets to 0 and the child dies, or they can't draw any more cards from the deck, meaning they just took too long. Tom now has the first turn with the goblins, and the 3 players realize they need to work together here to survive the battle. Tom goes straight into the combat phase and simply attacks with all 4 goblins. Now Christina, Sven and Jen talk through their options. Law Rune Enforcer and Ceruli Caretaker could block 2 goblins, but if Boris does that, he unfortunately gets knocked out. He wouldn't die directly from it, but Tom said they'd have to see a healer before he could rejoin the party. On their hand they have Fog, Unsummon and Arrestor's Seal. They can play up to 2 of these due to Seina's mana filter ability, even after they have blocked. They decide on the most elegant solution and cast Fog, with their mana to blank all the goblins' attacks. Then it's their turn, and they draw Giant Growth, the perfect card for a counterattack. The Dryad casts this on Fridtjof, and together with the Boros soldier they attack Tom directly, bringing the goblin gang's moral down to 0. The Game Master congratulates them on this quick victory, and now presents the results of the battle as follows. In the fog, the goblins have lost the child, and the mother has recovered it. As the fog clears, you can see Boris swinging his halberd, while the goblin gang flees in panic from the tree-high Fridtjof. But Christina simply uses Samut's run with Boris to catch up and overwhelm them. This succeeds, especially since one of their spells was used up for this purpose, and while the Boros soldier is still tying up the troublemakers, Sana and Fridtjof join him and they begin questioning the goblins for their motives. Apparently the child had to be kidnapped for a sacrificial ritual, and the goblins received the order to do so from their leader from Tin Street. They themselves belong to a smaller gang and do not know from whom the order came. That's all we can get out of them. So Fridtjof calls his Azorius colleagues to take the goblins away, then he decides to look around Tin Street. Boris, of course, as a righteous Boros soldier, doesn't want to be inferior to him and comes along, and curiosity also drives Sana into the busy market street. In the course of their adventure, the 3 players question some of the passers-by and merchants played by Tom about the goblin gangs and shady dealings in the area. In the process, the Game Master also presents them with small tasks and side quests here and there, where they can pick up valuable allies for further battles, such as Griffins of the Boros Legion or Centaurs of the Celestia Conclave. Finally, they discover the gang leader's whereabouts and track down the Wild Goblin's hideout in one of the side streets. There's a final boss fight, even with bigger opponents, like an enraged Ceratok and, of course, the Head Goblin, a goblin ringleader. This is properly played as a small game full of matching cards, where Christina, Sven and Jen together command their deck with all their characters gradually joining the fight, or optionally starting directly on the field, as in the first fight, as well as their spells and all the allies they have picked up during the adventure. They defeat the Game Master and his Goblin Gang deck after a tense battle and learn that this gang was connected to the Gruul clans. There's still a lot to uncover here, but this is where the first adventure of the campaign ends. As a reward for completing the adventure, all player characters are healed and they level up, which also means a mana value of 2. In this case, players either get to choose a new creature card as a sort of progression, or they get to give their current creature cards better stats, effects, and a generic mana cost increase. Christina does this without further ado, so after consulting with Tom, she gives her Boris 1 more toughness and strength and lets him cost 1 more. She also wants to build this modified card herself in an online generator and bring it printed next time. Sven is not that attached to his Fridtjof and decides to play an Azorius guild mage in the next round, who should investigate the case further at the next instance of the Azorius law, so to speak. He names the new mage Alexa and also fills out a new character sheet for her. Jen wants to keep his Sana, but not as a Ceruli caretaker, but now as the way more aggressive Dryad Sophisticate. She could have joined a guild now, but doesn't want to commit to that for now. After the creature cards had been adjusted, they now all get to pick a 2-mana spell, familiar or artifact, for the next game. Sven immediately takes the Azorius Signet, so that he will always have the right mana available in the future. Christina wants to reinforce Boris with the Short Strike spell, and Jen chooses the Fertile Ground enchantment, so that he can still contribute some mana fixing in the future. Everyone is happy with the outcome of the adventure and will soon meet for the second round in Ravnica. So much for the end of this little demonstration. This is how I imagine a system in which you could set up a lively role-playing game with only magic cards, pen and paper. I'm also in the process of finalizing this adventure from the example, so that I can test it with my friends, and maybe you with yours afterwards. For that, I have the alpha rules available as a PDF download and a link in the description below. Please check them out, and maybe you want to start your own adventure or even campaign straight ahead with your playgroup. If you need some more input or a little tutorial-like adventure, stay tuned. I have one ready for the Dungeons & Dragons adventures in the Forgotten Realms set and just need to translate it. And if you want, you can join our Discord server I made especially for this RPG format. You will also find the link in the description below. Now, do you like the idea itself and its execution? I am happy about every like. Do you see any difficulties or basic problems? Feel free to write me any thoughts you have about it as a comment. And if you want to know what happens next with this idea, subscribe to my channel. In any case, thanks for watching until the end and hope to see you again.